It was a cool, overcast day on the 15th of January, 1947. Betty Bersinger was walking her 3-year-old daughter to pick up a pair of shoes that had been left with the cobbler. She almost walked past the mannequin broken in half that lay just off of North Avenue. As she got closer, it became clear it was no mannequin. Welcome to History is Criminal. I'm your host, Nick Biddick, and with me is my lovely co host, the unapologetic, unqualified Kimberly. How are you today, Kimberly?
Oh, I'm just peachy. Nothing like starting a story with a casual walk with a child that turns into a crime scene. Makes me wonder what you've got planned for the rest of the episode. Let's dig into the dirty past again.
Elizabeth Betty Short had a messed up childhood, the third of 5 daughters born to Phoebe and Cleo Short on the 29th of July, 1924. The family had a good life as Cleo made a living building miniature golf courses in the area near Medford, Massachusetts, famous for the midnight ride of Paul Revere and the home of Jingle Bells. Bet you didn't know that.
I did not.
A boom in the popularity of mini golf meant the family was living the solid American dream. However, in 1929, the stock market crashed and the ripple effect engulfed the American economy. The miniature golf market dried up. Soon, Cleo found himself unable to support his family. Desperation set in, and Cleo made up his mind to do something drastic. In 1930, Cleo's car was found abandoned on the Charlestown Bridge. It was assumed that Cleo had jumped from the bridge into the Charles River below. With her husband gone, Phoebe moved the family into a modest apartment and found work as a bookkeeper. Living next door in the apartments was the Pecos family. Betty became a surrogate big sister to young Mary Pecos, who would later write a book, Childhood Shadows, The Hidden Story of the Black Dahlia Murder. The two girls spent a great deal of time watching the latest movies out of Hollywood. According to some, it was at this time that Betty was given the nickname Black Dahlia, though some claim that moniker came only after her death. Betty began to show signs of serious issues with her lungs, and at 15, she was diagnosed with bronchitis and asthma. This led to her having surgery. During her recovery, the doctor recommended that she spend some time in a warmer climate. This started her mother sending her to Miami, Florida. I personally don't know if I'd send my 15-year-old to Florida, but
I definitely would not.
in 1942, Phoebe and Betty reported seeing the very much alive Cleo on the street in Medford. Some even reported that Betty stopped Cleo and spoke with him. Shortly after, Phoebe received a letter from Cleo asking for his forgiveness. He said he'd been living in California for the past 12 years and was saving money to send for the family. Phoebe would not forgive him and refused to have anything to do with him. However, it seems that at least Betty kept in contact with her father. That year, she traveled to Vallejo, California to visit her father. This visit became more of a part time residence as father and daughter moved into a new place in Los Angeles.
Ah, yes, the classic. Sorry I vanished for over a decade, but I was totally going to send you some money excuse. Travel year 12 years, Cleo? Were you walking the money up to California one penny at a time?
This was not a happy reunion. The two were basically strangers. She had not seen him since she was 6 years old. For his part, he had no idea how to be a father, especially to a free spirited 19-year-old. Constant fighting and disagreements about her role in the household, he basically wanted her to be a live in maid, caused her to long for a better situation. At this time, she found work at Camp Cook, an Army base in Santa Barbara, California, now a Space Force base. Living on base, she attracted attention. It was 1942. She was young, attractive, and surrounded by thousands of young men far from home. Young men who were preparing to go off to war. Naturally, she was the focus of the interest of many of those young men. Voted Camp Cutie by the men, they said she was of movie star quality. Rumor was that she lived a short time with an army sergeant who abused her, but it was an arrest for underage drinking in 1943 that forced her to move back home to Medford. Still needing to spend at least part time in a warm climate, she resumed her trips to Miami. For the next couple of years, she led a wandering lifestyle. She took the train between Medford, Chicago, Los Angeles, and Miami. Full of life and good looking, she had little trouble finding a work as a waitress in the booming wartime economy. This allowed her to live an outgoing life wherever she roamed. She had gained a reputation as a transcontinental party girl, but on the 31st of December 1944, her partying came to an end. In Miami, she met a 22-year-old Army pilot, Major Matt Gordon Jr. By the way, Major Matt Gordon, doesn't that just sound like a Hollywood,
It's
action
like a
hero of the
cartoon
40s?
character.
Oh, yeah. Major Matt Gordon Jr. Belle fell in love quickly with the dashing, handsome aviator. In 1945, she started to tell friends that she and Gordon were engaged. She returned for the summer to Medford. It was said that she wore Gordon's wings on her blouse and started to plan the wedding. The war was all but over with the dropping of the atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki on the 6th and 9th of August, 1945. But tragedy struck when Gordon was killed in a plane crash on the 10th of August. It wouldn't be until late August that the news of Gordon's death reached Betty. She would have quickly gone from the elation of the Japanese surrender on the 14th to the great despair of his death just days later.
You'd roam from coast to coast without a scratch. But love, that was the real dangerous territory. Nothing prepared her for Cupid's lousy aim.
As winter returned to Medford, she headed again to Miami. Maybe as a way to distract her from her broken heart, she filled her time with a parade of men. She was beautiful and confident and seemed keenly aware of the effects she had on men. She also understood the value of being beautiful, young, and single, and was not above finding men to shower her with nice things. They bought her drinks, dinner, and even supposedly paid her rent. She still waitressed, but that money seemed to go mostly towards her wardrobe. But an old friend from her time in California reemerged, Lieutenant Joseph Fickling. Like Gordon, Fickling was an aviator. The two had met years earlier before he was shipped overseas. With Fickling now living in Southern California, Betty packed up and moved to Los Angeles in July 1946 to be close to Fickling. In letters that ended up in police custody, and then, of course, in the newspapers, he expressed jealousy over Betty's constant flirtations. He questioned just where exactly he ranked in her heart. She made no attempt to convince him that he was number one. Feeling rejected, he made the move to North Carolina to become a pilot in the fledgling private aviation industry. But he was still clearly under his spell, writing to her regularly and even sending money, including $100, about $1,500 in 2025 dollars, the month before her death. She wrote him back, including a letter in January 1947, telling him she was going to move to Chicago to become a fashion model. It was the last time Fickling heard from Betty. Her last year in LA was far from glamorous. She was constantly on the move between hotels, apartments, boarding houses, and close friends' couches. For a time, she lived in what seems to have been a hostel, sharing a two-bedroom apartment with 8 other women. The women, all young, worked as cocktail waitresses, telephone operators, and dime dance girls, each of them in LA chasing that Hollywood dream.
No champagne, silk gowns, or moonlight balconies. Just 8 girls, one bathroom, and dime dances. Sounds like a glamorous time in Hollywood. Nah.
Now, if you're unfamiliar with what a dime dance is, it was actually a pretty common thing at the time. A guy would go to a club, buy a bunch of tickets for 10 cents, equaling about $1.40 today each. Then he would give the ticket to the girl so he could dance with her. At the end of the night, the girl would turn the tickets in and get a commission based on the number of dances she had that night. And while it seems shady AF, the vast majority of dime dance girls are respectable girls just trying to make ends meet. In the apartment, they slept in bunk beds they rented for $1 a day, about $14 in 2025. It seems that even with this, Betty's ability to pay or her willingness seemed to be questionable. She snuck out the side door when the manager came to collect. That was on the 15th of December, 1946. Her roommates later told the Los Angeles Times she was out with a different fellow every night and didn't have a job. One said that she would prowl Hollywood Boulevard. Despite the sounds of this, there's no evidence that she was working as a prostitute. She wasn't above letting men pay her way, however. In late 1946, she met Robert Manley, called Red because of his flaming red hair. He had saw her standing on a street, a beautiful young woman looking lost. He, a married man, thought, "Oh, I have an idea. I'm going to go see if that girl needs a ride."
Yeah, right.
Yeah, smooth move for a married guy, huh? Pulling up along the curb, he called out and asked if she needed help. At first, she wouldn't even make eye contact, let alone reply. But he persisted, telling her he just wanted to see if she needed a ride. Finally, she responded, and yes, she did, in fact, need a ride home. Home at that time was with a family who had taken her in after finding her sleeping in an all night movie theater. But kindness only goes so far, and Betty had taken full advantage of the family's generosity. She lounged around the house all day and then spent the night partying, only to return late in the evening or early in the morning. So they informed her that it was time to find a new place to freeload. On the 8th of January, she called Red to come pick her up. The two stayed in the motel together that night. Red would insist to reporters that Betty slept in her clothes and the two never had sex. On the morning of the 9th of January, he drove her to the bus station and helped her check in her luggage, seemingly just a place for them to store stuff in a locker. She informed Red she was going to Berkeley to stay with her sister, whom she was meeting at the Biltmore Motel in downtown LA. He dropped her off at the Biltmore at 6:30 p.m. and then drove to San Diego to be with his family. That was the last time anyone reported seeing Betty alive. The Biltmore was grand, marbled floors, hand painted ceilings, and crystal chandeliers. It catered to a clientele of wealthy businessmen, politicians, and people in the movie industry. It was the type of place that Betty would feel at home and the type of crowd that she could try and find a new friend.
Let me get this straight. We've got a night in a motel, a fully clothed alibi, a bus ticket that's just for locker storage, and a grand hotel entrance. And somehow this is supported. This is supposed to make sense. Sounds totally logical. I think something's up.
Yeah, she's seen leaving the Biltmore on January the 9th, but no one could recall seeing her leave with anyone. That final week of her life is a mystery. Then Miss Ersinger went for that fateful walk on the morning of the 15th of January. By the time police detectives Harry Henderson and Finis Brown arrived on the scene, it was pure chaos. Reporters and gawkers had trampled the crime scene, destroying evidence in the process. The detectives ordered the crowd back and then got to work, hoping to find something of value. The scene was gruesome beyond imagination. The body lay naked, face up. It had been cut in half and positioned for effect. The face had been slashed, giving it a sickly grin. The arms were raised above the head at a 45-degree angle. The lower body was positioned a foot from the torso, with the legs spread apart, and the intestines had been neatly tucked under the buttocks. Both the body and the surrounding area showed little signs of blood, leading detectives to believe the body had been killed elsewhere and dumped here piece by piece. It even appeared the body had been washed before placement at the site. Decide what seems like the psychosexual nature of the crime and the placement. No semen was found at the scene or on the body. There was dew under the body, and this allowed them to place the time of the dumping after 2 a.m. Measurements of the corpse placed the height of the victim at 5'6" and the weight around 115 pounds. Much as the press was a hindrance at the crime scene, it would prove vital. The LAPD gave the victim's prints to the Los Angeles Examiner, who used their sound photo machine, an early type of fax machine, to send the prints to the FBI headquarters in Washington, D.C. There, the FBI matched the prints to Elizabeth Short from both her time working at the Army base and her arrest for underage drinking. Detectives Hanson and Brown now at least had a name. This also meant that the examiner had the name and a photo sent by the FBI before the LAPD.
The cops hand over the prints to the press to get the ID, but instead of the FBI sending the info back to the cops, they shoot it right back to the paper. Guess the LAPD got outplayed by their own paperwork. Classic.
I can't imagine the LAPD in 1946 like having anything other than like a telephone.
Probably not.
The examiner, seeing how beautiful she was, knew they had a story. Sex, mystery, murder. It was sure to sell papers. In a move that would make the low-life yellow journalist sick, the examiner contacted her mother. They told Phoebe that her daughter Elizabeth had won a beauty contest. This enabled them to gather a plethora of personal information and family information. Then, after milking that proverbial cow for all the information they could get, they sprung the news on her that her child was actually dead. Now, I'm a diehard supporter of a free press. A functioning democracy cannot exist without a free press. But like all rights, it comes with some responsibility, and this move by the LA Examiner deserves a special place in hell.
I'm with you there. Free press is one thing, but this is a gutless, soul-sucking low blow. The examiner didn't just cross the line, they bulldozed it. They earned themselves a reserved spot in hell's VIP section.
The story quickly spread across the nation. The Washington Post ran a headline: Police seek mad pervert in girl's death. Even before an ID was made, the LA papers were running with the story. At first, they had mistaken her for a teenager, placing the age of the corpse between 15 and 18 years old, not 22. But once an ID was made, they wasted no time in digging into every sordid detail of her personal life. They also started referring to her as the Black Dahlia. While some claim this was her childhood nickname, it's more likely that it came from the movie The Blue Dahlia, starring Alan Ladd and Veronica Lake, a film about a former bomber pilot accused of killing his philandering wife. Sounds a little too close to home.
Yes, it does.
But the movie was released in 1946 and seemed to fit the real life crime close enough for the sensation hungry press. While waiting for the results from the prints to come back, 40 police had canvassed the neighborhood. Going door to door, they asked if anyone had any idea who the girl was or had anyone gone missing. They checked laundromats, dumpsters, and storm drains, hoping to find bloody clothing or another clue. But the search came up empty handed. Once the police had the name, they tracked down Cleo Short. He told them he had not spoken to his daughter in almost 3 years. It seemed he still held a grudge because she wasn't willing to be his live-in maid and instead chose to run around. His words, by the way, not mine. He even refused to go to the morgue and ID the body. But there was another man detectives were eager to talk to, and that was Red Manley. Manley was arrested on suspicion of murder, but released after he passed a polygraph test. It was Manley who identified a shoe and a handbag found several miles from the scene on 19th Street. He remembered the shoe because he had paid a cobbler to resole the shoe in San Diego. The handbag, he said, smelled strongly of her perfume. 19 other boyfriends of Betty were brought in for questioning, but no solid leads were gathered. 30 men came forward to confess to the killing, but each seemed to just be an attention seeking wacko. Hanson and Brown had to waste precious time tracking down each of those false confessions, some from as far away as the Bronx, New York.
Confess to a murder you didn't commit. Such a guy move. Nothing says fame seeker like shouting, I did it, just to get a moment in the spotlight. Because who wouldn't want their name linked to a headline, even if it was for all the wrong reasons?
Now, Hanson, he had actually come to the conclusion that the killer was not someone who was a regular in her life, but was a quote, pickup. Thousands were interviewed. At one point, an officer made the conjecture that the way the body was so cleanly bisected, the killer had to have medical knowledge. Because apparently, you can't cut a person in half unless you like gone to 4 years of medical school. With this information, the LAPD was able to get the USC Medical School, located in the same neighborhood as the body's location, to turn over a list of all medical students. The FBI was sent hundreds of letters from people claiming the murderer was someone they knew. Now, these typically turned out to be someone the writer had a long-standing issue with. One letter to the FBI was from a woman stating that the killer had swindled her out of $75 with a promise to get her into the movies. The list of suspects was long: jilted lovers, jealous boyfriend, angry wives, but the condition of the body pointed more to the work of a madman than a crime of passion. The police looked at other men in her life. After Manley was released, there was, of course, Fickling. His motive would have been jealousy, but he was across the country at the time of the killing. Given the speed of air travel at the time, there's no way he could have flown across the country and back without it being obvious.
Sure, plenty of jealous lovers and angry exes on the list, but this wasn't a crime of passion. It was straight up crazy. And I get Fickling, but there's no way he pulled off a cross country murder.
Now there was a better suspect right in LA: Mark Hansen, the manager of the sleazy nightclub called the Florentine Garden. The examiner received Betty's address book with Hansen's name embossed on the cover, which led the police to take a look at Hansen. The club had a risque burlesque show, and most of the girls working the show stayed in Mark Hansen's home behind the club. Rumor was that Betty had stayed at Hansen's for a few months back in 46, but left after he unsuccessfully tried to sleep with her. However, nothing came of this lead. People kept returning to Manley. He passed a polygraph, but even today, polygraphs are so inaccurate that they're not generally allowed in court. So a 1947 polygraph might not be a solid proof of his innocence. In 1954, he was undergoing treatment at a psychiatric hospital after reportedly hearing voices. During this stay, he was given sodium pentothal, what some call truth serum. Questioned while on sodium pentothal, he again was cleared of being involved in the killing. Of course, you can probably imagine the accuracy of sodium pentothal, which, by the way, is also used to knock people out before surgery. I know, because that's what they gave me when I had my knee surgery. I don't think I told any truths, though. In 1986, 36 years to the day after he dropped Betty off at the Biltmore, he died. The coroner listed his cause of death as an accidental fall. Over the years, countless theories came forward. Mary Pecos, Betty's surrogate little sister from Medford, even put forward the name of famed director Orson Welles because she had once seen him perform a magic act, a sawing a woman in half.
Hmm.
Another theory, spelled out in 1997 by LA Times writer Larry Harnich, points to Dr. Walter Alonzo Bailey. Dr. Bailey lived only one block from the location of the body. His daughter was an acquaintance of Betty's sister, Virginia. Harnish speculated that Dr. Bailey was suffering from a brain disease that caused him to kill Betty. There's no evidence that Betty and Dr. Bailey ever even met, and he had no history of violence. It should also be noted here that Dr. Bailey was 67 years old at the time and would have needed a lot of help moving the body to where it was found.
At this point, it's like they're tossing spaghetti at the wall, hoping something sticks. Orson Welles and magic tricks, a 67-year-old doctor with no record, sounds less like serious suspects and more like a last ditch stab in the dark.
Now, actor and crime author John Gilmore, who met Betty once when he was a young man,
Oh, he must have done it.
well, he wrote a book claiming that a drifter named Jack Anderson Wilson confessed to him of killing Betty. According to Gilmore, Wilson was able to give details the police never released, including a vaginal defect that would have made it impossible for Betty to have sexual intercourse. Now, I have absolutely no idea if that's a real fact or just one this guy said and Gilmore ran with. Just before Wilson was to be arrested, he was killed in a hotel fire. People have noted that many of Gilmore's sources couldn't be checked, causing him to doubt the veracity of his claim. Two authors have come forward with books stating that their respective fathers were the killer. Janice Knowlton, in her book, Daddy Was the Black Dahlia Killer, states that recovered childhood memories point to her father. Not only did her father kill Betty, but he forced her to watch. She would go on to accuse her father of 9 such killings. She was so adamant in her story that she openly attacked anyone not supporting her claims until her death in 2004 by suicide. Now, he got recovered childhood memories. I'm not sure the exact record on the accuracy of those, but seems like she might have had some other issues going on too. The second My Daddy Did It book was published in 2003 by retired LAPD detective Stephen Hodel. In his book, he states his father, George Hodel, was a sick, twisted man who held orgies in the family home. George Hodel was charged but acquitted of the rape of his 14-year-old daughter. So right here, we can just say this guy is kind of a scumbag. Whether or not he killed Betty, who knows?
Yeah.
Much of Steve Hodel's evidence seems to focus around a photograph that he came to possession of after his father's death. The photos are of a dark haired woman he claims is Elizabeth Betty Short. Short's surviving family members, however, refuted the claim that it was Betty in these pictures. In 1996, the case of the Black Dahlia was handed off to Detective Brian Carr. Now, I know it seems kind of crazy, but since there's no statute of limitations, it remains an open case. But Detective Carr stated unless a long lost confession or a piece of real evidence comes to light, the case will most likely go unsolved. A small library could be filled with the books and articles written about the death of Elizabeth Betty Short. In 2006, famed director Brian De Palma released a film with a superstar cast, with Mia Kirshner in the title role. At different points, her name and ring has been tarnished by accusations of a questionable lifestyle. But in the end, she was a 22-year-old girl whose life was violently taken from her by what can only be described as a sick, sadistic monster.
It's heartbreaking how quickly society judges. But at the end of the day, none of that matters. What matters is the cruel injustice she faced. She wasn't defined by rumors. She was a young life stolen far too soon.
TheCrimeLibrary.org, the Black Dahlia in Hollywood.com, and the Black Dahlia Weebly.com were the main sources for this episode. This has been History is Criminal. Join Kim and I next week as we dig into the attempted assassination of a Gilded Age robber baron. Until then, if you like what you heard, tell a friend, and if you don't like it, tell an enemy. Never suffer alone.